So for those of you that don't know, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. Yes, some say I grew up in a cult. I never saw it that way because I was born into it. So if you're born into it, it's all you really know. I do know that throughout my school years, I felt terribly left out. I felt left out of all kinds of holidays and birthdays and social type of gatherings. But what's interesting is that it wasn't the fact that I rebelled. When I was like 16, 17, I started slowly rebelling out of the religion. I was pressured a lot to get baptized. I had a mischievous streak, even though I was a really, really good kid, super, super good kid. Like I basically followed everything that my parents wanted, did everything that they wanted me to do. From the time I was able to talk, I was incredibly polite and just an overly good child. And when I got into my teenage years, I started to rebel against things I didn't agree with. I started having dreams, sometimes that came true. I had severe night terrors where I would wake up in the middle of the night and be halfway asleep, halfway in a dream, and be able to consciously know what was going on in the room, yet not able to scream, not able to move, feeling like electricity was going through my body. And it was terrifying. I dealt with that for many years, especially in my teenage years. I found out later that it was called sleep paralysis. There's a lot of controversy over sleep paralysis, and I do think that it's something scientific having to do with the brain. And I also believe that it has to do with our own fears. So the fears that I had when I was in the religion were incredibly, incredibly strong. And I think the fears were what caused a lot of the sleep paralysis to happen and the nightmares. But we're not really here to talk about the nightmares or the sleep paralysis. That's a side note. What really went on were things that I couldn't explain. So one night, I had a dream, and in the dream, my grandfather passed away. I remember it being incredibly vivid. I remember it being so real that I woke up with tears streaming down my face. The first thing that I thought of when I woke up was my grandfather. And I heard him whistle singing. So instead of just singing, he would whistle, but he would have like that shakiness that you have when you sing, which is called vibrato. Ran downstairs, flung my arms around him, and was so grateful that he was alive and okay. He was my world. My grandfather was the one that taught me to sing. He would teach me little songs and follow me around with a tape recorder. So when I dreamed that he died, that was a huge deal. Huge, huge, huge. Tears streaming down my face. I run downstairs, flung my arms around him. And he's like, what's the matter with you? What happened? And I said, I dreamed that you died. And he said, I didn't die. My father in the Philippines died this afternoon. It was in that moment when I heard those words that I knew things beyond our reality. I knew that I was tuning into something that was beyond the religion. I knew that it was something that I was tuning into. It wasn't someone telling me these things. It wasn't someone implanting the dream in my head. I was tuning into it. And to this day, I believe that I was tuning into the frequency of my grandfather's father. They look very much alike. So in the dream, it looked like my grandfather, but in reality, it was my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather. So it was at that time when I found that out, I started really questioning the whole idea of life after death and the whole idea of what happens when you die. I started to really seek answers in metaphysics, in the occult. I started learning about the chakra system. I started researching everything that I could get my hands on having to do with chakras and what they resonate to and sound frequencies. And I started listening to Stephen Halpern back in the day. Now remember, I wasn't baptized. So if I did something that went against Jehovah's Witness principles. I would get counseled, but they really couldn't do anything. They couldn't tell my family to ostracize me or to not talk to me or to shun me because I wasn't baptized. And I knew during that time that I wasn't going to get baptized because I was too rebellious. I was too set in my belief systems, and I also was too angry when I saw certain things that I didn't agree with. Like, for example, I remember my mom and my grandmother putting cloth over their heads. It was just a simple thing during prayer. It was like during a prayer when we had like this big gathering of people at the house. And I thought, why are they doing that? And it turns out, supposedly, it was a way to show that they were below the men. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but it was a way to show like their humility or something, or that they were below the men that were heading the prayer at that time, which was my uncle at that time. So it just all didn't make sense to me. Even in my 20s, when I would go back for memorials, the memorials for Jesus Christ, I would go once a year for several years just to make my family happy, just to appease them, right? Of course, they would get their hopes up and they would think that I was going back, or they would think that I'm going to like study with somebody, study the Bible with somebody. And the ultimate goal is to get you baptized, right? So that was never going to happen. But they tried. They definitely tried. And of course, it's all out of love. When your family is so brainwashed because they grew up in the religion themselves, they don't know anything else. My grandparents were Catholic before they became Jehovah's Witness. So they converted. But my parents were both born into it. I was born into it. So I consider myself extremely lucky that I had enough knowledge of myself to not get baptized at that time. Another thing that happened that's interesting, I had told my grandmother that I was starting to work with the angels. And this was when I was about 17 or 18. I started working with Archangel Michael, Archangel Uriel, Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Raphael, calling on them for protection, for different things, depending. But I was still praying to Jehovah, and I was still calling on Jesus Christ during prayer. So I was utilizing what I had learned in the religion, but I was using aspects of Jewish mysticism, also known as Kabbalah, without even knowing it. So I told my grandmother that I was working with the angels, and I was always calling on Jehovah and Jesus Christ, and I told her, I tried to assure her that everything was all good, don't worry, she was just really worried about me, because I was always doing something, I was always up to something, whether it was like learning runes. I also learned runes at that time when I was like 16, got counseled by the lady that I was studying the Bible with. She made me throw them out. She wanted me to burn them, but I ended up just throwing them away. And I think that year is when I ended my Bible studies. But going back to the angel thing, my grandma, she literally would give anything for me. She was just like this amazing, amazing soul. She was the matriarch of the whole family. So when she told her friend, who happened to be the wife of an elder, about my calling on angels, I got sat down the next day and I was talked to and shown Bible scriptures, mainly about divination and the dangers of divination. I was also prayed for. I just continued working with angels because that was what I was drawn to. I was really, really drawn to it. And I felt like it was giving me the extra protection that I needed at that time because I had a lot of fears, So another thing that happened was when it was Halloween one year. At that time, I loved Halloween. And I wasn't allowed to love Halloween because, according to Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of religions actually, Halloween is the devil's holiday. But the reason why I loved Halloween, especially during that time, was because of the way you were able to express yourself. You were able to be someone that you weren't for one night. You were able to transform. So, of course, me being my mischievous self, found a mask in my uncle's closet. And this mask was like, kind of like a medicine man mask. It had all crazy, wacky hair, and it was really scary. For someone that was like a teenager at that time, it scared me. So, I mean, imagine if I'm wearing it and like a kid comes to the door. But I thought it was really funny. So, of course, I wore it and handed out Halloween candy. Well, guess who comes to the door? But the same lady that counseled me on calling on angels and her husband, who happened to be an elder. So they were pretty shocked to find me at the door, handing out candy and dressed in a costume. Of course, I got counseled again. And by that time, I had just had it with the counseling and the feeling like anything I did was wrong or bad. And knowing that in my mind, I was just having fun. For me, it came from an innocent place. And not only that, I felt like it was a nice thing to give out Halloween candy because I didn't want to be that one door in the neighborhood where nobody gave out candy. Honestly, I was really tired of being the odd one out. Tired of not feeling like I belonged. Tired of feeling like in school, I was always the odd man out or the odd woman out rather, because even with my food allergies and my health issues, I had to sit on the sidelines. I couldn't go to gym class a lot of times. I couldn't go outside a lot of times because I was so covered in rashes from all of my allergies from being outdoors. So there were just so many things that like catapulted like one after another. And I think at that point I had just had it. I was done. I was just done with not being able to be myself, not being able to be true to things I believed in. And yeah, of course it made my family sad. Of course it made them upset, but I had to follow my own path. Not only that, but what do you do when you see spirits next to people? I didn't see them with my physical eyes next to people. I saw them in my mind's eye, almost like a video playing in my mind. So imagine if you're seeing like these little clips of videos in your imagination and they're tying to people. So when you see a person, you suddenly start to have like a memory or almost like a video playing in your mind of what's happening. So for example, something that happened with my mom when her older brother had passed away. My uncle. I had an uncle that passed away many, many years ago. And I decided on a whim to bring her cookies and bring her like a snack at work because I wanted to cheer her up. So while I was driving to her job, I remember I suddenly had like a vision, what I now know of as a vision. But at that time, I didn't really know that it was a vision. I thought it was my imagination. But what I saw was a movie in my mind of my uncle with his hands on the handlebars of a bike behind my mother when she was a child. And he was teaching her to ride a bike. But it wasn't on like a regular road. It was on like this dirt road. And I didn't see any trees anywhere. There were no trees. And I was like, that's really weird. But at the same time, I was like feeling all this emotion. I was feeling my uncle's love towards my mother so intensely that I began to cry while I was driving. So when I got to her job, I gave her the cookies and she was really surprised. Like she didn't expect that. And I told her, Ma, I think I had a vision about Uncle Edwin. And I said, I saw he was behind you on a bike and you were riding the bike. And I explained to her, I'm like, it was weird because it was on a dirt road and there were no other trees around. There was no people around. There were no trees. There was no like road. And she said, Maya, that was in Africa. She said, he taught me to ride the bike in Africa. And she kind of was speechless. Like she didn't really know what to say because she's not allowed to really believe in the things that I believe in, like the mediumship and things like that. She's not allowed to, like, as a Jehovah's Witness, she's not really allowed to entertain it. So of course she listens to me because she's my mother, but she doesn't really give feedback. You know, she like kind of cuts off the conversation when I tell her things like that. But she does listen, but she kind of like changes the subject because that's kind of what she's supposed to do. You know, she's kind of following the way that they want her to be. It is kind of sad because there's a lot of things that I experience that I feel like I want her to experience too, but she has walls up because of the religion, which I understand. I understand that that's the way it has to be because that's the way that they were taught. So we respect each other. We respect each other's beliefs. I do my best to kind of contain myself when it comes to the mediumship and when it comes to spiritual matters and things having to do with spirituality. I kind of suppress it around my parents because I know what makes them feel uncomfortable. And it's out of a deep love and respect for them. I can only hope that one day they'll come to realizations. But until then, I'm still going to see what I see. I'm still going to understand things the way that I've come to understand them. So that's my story. That's pretty much why I got away from Jehovah's Witnesses. And I no longer go to the Kingdom Hall. But I know a lot of you out there have similar experiences. If you guys want to talk about your experiences, feel free to write them below. I'd love to hear them. I think that former Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot to say, a lot of unique experiences when it comes to spirituality especially. I have to respect my family's wishes because one of my uncles and my cousin are both elders in the congregation. So I have to be very careful that I respect them and I respect their beliefs. But there's a very fine line between respecting their beliefs and telling the truth. And my goal on this channel is to tell the truth and to talk about my experiences. Not only so that I help people that have been through similar, but so that I can bring awareness for those who are suffering. Because there's a lot of people I know that are still in the religion that are suffering. And I hope that's not true, but I mean, I can't imagine if I had gotten baptized, the kind of suffering that I would be going through. So for those of you that are struggling or suffering or going through things that are beyond what I went through, please know that you're not alone. And there's definitely people out there that are going through very similar things. And there's always a way to find the path that's right for you. So hopefully this was interesting for you. And if you've watched up until now, thank you so much. Those of you that have subscribed, thank you so much. It means the world to me. And I hope you will like this video, share it, get it up in the algorithm so that way more people can see it. And I hope to see you very soon. Have a great week.